boils, ghouls, and non-binary fools. I'm your host, Captain Myenstein, and I'm enjoying a bucket of popcorn while watching a deranged masked man kill a bunch of teenagers, and his own doctor tries and fails to stop him. But when I'm not doing that, I'm here to silently reviewing horror movies. If you're smart, you can tell by today's opening joke, or the title of this video, that I am reviewing the 1978 Halloween. If you didn't know, Halloween is my favorite horror movie and horror movie series, right in front of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I might review soon. So this video has been a long while in the make. As we all know, Halloween Kills was supposed to have come out already, but because of the world's impending doom, it has been delayed, scheduled to be released later this year. So to get ready for the upcoming film, I have decided to review as many of the Halloween films as possible before summer break. So get ready as I delve deep into John Carpenter's Halloween, first set upon this world in 1978. This film, as popularly known, kicked off the slasher film frenzy that would run rampant in the early to mid 80s. But the rest slasher movies before this film, people have been thinking a guy in a mask with a knife was scary for hundreds of years. It's nothing new. Co-writer / director John Carpenter was given one job by producers Erwin Bonds and Mustafa Akkad to write a film centered around the basic idea of a man killing babysitters on a Halloween night. The flick could have been just that premise done in a cheap and simple way, and it would not have been as culturally impactful as it is today. But what John Carpenter ended up making was way more than that. Honestly, the flick would have been another case of Black Christmas, a standard horror film with a premise simple and straightforward, and written and directed like that. Fun fact, John Carpenter years before tried to create a sequel to Black Christmas with the help of the film's director, the late Bob Clark. R.I.P. Get this, his proposal of a sequel is going to be about a killer killing a bunch of students in a sorority house on Halloween, and the flick was going to be called Halloween. Apparently this movie was fated to happen, and thanks saying it did. When the film was released on the 25th of October in 1978, it was only a modest success at the time, relying mostly on good word of mouth, and critics were harsh to the flick. However, nowadays, most people agree that Halloween is just one of the best horror films, but one of the best films ever made, period. That just goes to show that something that is much maligned now could go on to be praised later down the line. Carpenter, being an up-and-coming director in the film biz, along with Halloween being a low-budget film, was given a lot of creative control, so he had a bunch of time to flesh out the characters and mythos in the film. He took a simple premise of a guy killing babysitters on Halloween night and turned it into something extraordinary. Now, this film is literally over 40 years old, so I'm not gonna give you a spoiler warning like I do with all my other vids. If you haven't seen this gem of a film, that's on you. Now, on to the review. The first thing to make this film great for me was the famous opening title sequence featuring a flickering jack-o'-lantern behind John Carpenter's tantalizing score. Just a warning, if you don't like repetitiveness, don't listen to the score for this film. Heed my warning. The great thing about the credits is the simpleness of it all. It's literally just a jack-o'-lantern sitting on a black background moving towards the audience with music accompanying it. Nothing special about it at first glance, but the credits serve as a mission statement for the film. Simpleness taken to the extreme and making the mundane extraordinary with quiet style and finesse. The jack-o'-lantern kinda looks like Michael holding a knife. I'm pretty sure somebody else has noticed this, right? The first scene is told through a first-person perspective on Halloween night of 1963. Admittedly, it's very easy nowadays to disvalue this scene. It's pretty much common knowledge now that this is Michael Myers, and that he was only 6 years old when he committed his first murder, the brutal slaying of his own sister Judith. But when this flick was first released, audiences were shocked to discover that someone this young could commit such a heinous act. Hey, I murdered my first victim when I was only 900 years old. That's very young in human years, I think at least. The opening manages to accomplish everything a horror opening should in as little time as possible. It establishes how Michael functions as a killer, how easily he calculates everything, as if everything was thought of beforehand. The first-person perspective acts as a gateway to Michael's mind, a look into his psyche, because, let's face it, we don't know a whole lot about Michael in this film, but that's honestly the beauty of the flick, how Michael is barely a person, just a looming presence in the town of Haddonfield, a boogeyman, a shape. Pretentious much? The POV gives us what few movies give, the clear point of view of the killer, the deliberate calculation that comes with stalking their prey, from choosing the weapon of choice to picking out the disguise. Although the suspense is killed because you know where the killer is in correlation with the victim, that's really the only gripe I have with this scene. Honestly, this POV stuff must be a pain to make. Has anybody noticed that Michael is surprisingly stealthy? How did they finish so fast? Jesus. Of course, this scene is important for one more thing. It gives us a murder early on because there isn't going to be one for like 50 more minutes. Having something scary at the beginning of the flick sets a great tone that the flick definitely lives up to. She couldn't push a 6-year-old away from her. Anyway, Michael heads downstairs for a post-murder sandwich. Hey, make a turkey sandwich, my favorite post-murder meal. Mike, I'm pretty sure the kitchen's that way. Oh, he's just heading outside. Oh no! His parents are there! He's gotta hide the body before it's too late! Yeah, this reveal is common knowledge now, but back when the flick was first released, audiences were reasonably shocked to see a 6-year-old holding a bloody knife. Their faces probably looked like Mike's parents. They stand there shocked for a long time. With Michael being a kindergartner, the statement made is clear and simple. Anybody could be a killer, doesn't matter on their age or background. Be mindful of the people you're around. Anyway, we jump forward 15 years to All Hallows Eve in 1978 and are introduced to Dr. Samuel Loomis, played by veteran actor Donald Pleasance, who sadly passed away in 1995. R.I.P. His legacy will definitely be remembered. Pleasance is probably best known nowadays for the role of Loomis, and he played the character with a fiery intensity, a deep desire to see Michael, his own patient mind you, dead. Being the only person exposed to Michael for 15 years has brought Loomis to the edge of madness. Loomis is driving to Smith's Grove Sanitarium to take Michael to a court hearing with nurse Marion Chambers. She really isn't that important in this movie. She's really just there to give Loomis someone to talk to.
Don't underestimate it.
Don't you think we could refer to it as him?
If you say so.
I like that little exchange there, showing Loomis's complete belief that Michael is not human. Come on, she's smoking with the windows down. When they arrive, they find the crazed inmates of the sanitarium just walking about outside. I just want to know how they got out. Like, what happened? Wow, that lightning strike was convenient. Michael jumps atop Marion's car and toys with the woman, pulling at her hair and breaking her window like a savage. Did she think he was just gonna leave? Michael drives Marion out of the car and gets into it himself. The way he moves. How did he learn how to drive, honestly? So, yeah, Michael is now on the run, or drive, to Haddonfield, his hometown, and Loomis is taking a really long time to get there, because Michael is already there. Wow, that was fast.
Now, for God's sakes, he can't drive a car. He was doing very well last night. Maybe someone around here gave him lessons.
Yeah, like they would give a mute guy who killed his own sister and is possibly a psychopath driving lessons. For what purpose? The next day on Halloween, appropriately enough, we are introduced not to the main protagonist but to the small Illinois town of Haddonfield, a sleepy village that is the perfect setting for a horror film, a place that oozes small town nostalgia. The calm nature of Haddonfield gives the film an underlying sense of tragedy when Michael eventually returns and wreaks havoc in one neighborhood. The scene introducing Haddonfield is setting up the normalcy of the town, which will be uprooted by the shape later on. John Carpenter went to the next level, making Haddonfield feel like a real believable town that seems lively and lived in. The film was actually shot in Pasadena and could have easily been set in California, making it seem like every other Hollywood flick, but the small town feel the movie gives off differentiates it from the standard film at the time. Now, there are some mistakes here and there. In some shots, palm trees can be seen if you pause at the right time, but specific locales in Pasadena passes a small villa in the middle of autumn well enough. Cinematographer Dean Cunny does a great job at cutting the palm trees out though, and a few fallen leaves poured onto the ground is enough to enhance suspension of disbelief. Haddonfield also fits the theme of duality in the film, a picturesque suburbia with a Puritan overtone that hides a dark side. Honestly, Haddonfield is almost as much a character as the actual characters. Wow, they trick-or-treat early. Speaking of characters, in the same scene, we're introduced to Laurie Strode, played by then newbie Jamie Lee Curtis. This role is what led to Jamie becoming a household name and being branded a scream queen by horror fans, long before she became a spokesperson for a brand of yogurt that makes you poop. She ends up at the old Myers place where, coincidentally, a Myers happens to be. Based on the timeline, this really could be a family reunion. Maybe Laurie reminds him of Judith, and that's why she's a target.
I wish I had you all alone, just the two of us.
That song really foreshadows the ending of this movie. Michael stalks throughout Haddonfield without alerting anyone of his presence, following Laurie, her friends Annie and Linda, played by Nancy Keys and BJ Souls respectively, and young Tommy Doyle, the boy Laurie is going to babysit tonight. Imagine the lives those boys led. Do none of these people feel this man staring at them? Jeez. Michael's presence is felt throughout the town and the surrounding area, but he's too elusive and nobody seems to notice or catch him. The gravestone to his sister Judith's grave is missing. A mask and a knife is robbed from a hardware store. They need to start selling those at hardware stores again. And Loomis sees Marion's cigarette pack lying on the ground. Oh, also, there's a dead mechanic lying on the ground. but that is totally normal and common in Illinois. Loomis is really the only person who's looking for Michael, despite his attempts to warn people, but he never pays any damn attention. Look behind you, you idiot! The only person lucky, or unlucky depending on the perspective, enough to catch even the slightest glimpse at Michael is Lori, but her bewildered friends pay her no mind. They think nothing of the creepy masked man dressed in a suspicious mechanic jumpsuit stalking them. Whoa, where did he go? I like how he just disappears while Lori is looking at him. Gives him the otherworldly vibe he deserves. The late Deborah Hill wrote a lot of the dialogue for the teenage girls, being a babysitter herself, and she reels in a raw, real touch to the girls, giving them distinct personalities that we can really decipher just based on their dialogue alone. The girls aren't complex characters, but they have just enough personality to make you care for them. Lori is this shy, nerdy girl with intellect who represents purity, but she will still smoke some cigarettes, more times than I remembered honestly, and pound out the boys like Ben Tramer. Oh, our Lord and Savior, Ben Tramer. More about him in my Halloween 2 review.
Ben Tramer? I knew it!
Annie is the deadpan one with copious amounts of snark and sass, and who seems to have a sarcastic comment ready for any occasion.
Oh, terrific. I've got 3 choices. Watch the kids sleep, listen to Linda screw around, or talk to you.
Linda is the popular chick with a bubbly, seemingly always happy attitude who seems to have a habit of saying totally like that's the only word in her noggin. Seriously, does she ever get tired of saying that?
I get my hair done at 5 and the dance is at 8. I'll be totally wiped out.
I don't think you have enough to do tomorrow.
Totally.
The girls aren't your typical slasher fare. A lot of time is spent with them, getting used to them and getting to know them, even before Michael proceeds to do anything. The town of Haddonfield feels so much like a real place, not just because of the teenage girls, but because not a lot of the town is shown, offering an ambiguity that allows the audience to identify with it. The small town is the perfect place to build a mythic folklore. These people have been building up Michael to be this phantom-like killer, but on one night 15 years ago, he killed one person and was sent to an institution. As the cemetery caretaker tells Loomis later on, recounting the tale of Charlie Bowles from Russellville, who murdered his family,
For hacksaw. And then he went back into the house, and he kissed his wife and his 2 children goodbye, and then he proceeded... Where are we?
or maybe he just cut some wood. He never finishes the tale. Every small town has these stories they tell that eventually become an interconnected web of mythology. That gives off the scary possibility that every small town could have their own boogeyman figure. Maybe that next door neighbor of yours is a cold-blooded killer watching you right now. Doesn't Hollywood have a Mike Myers who played in the Austin Powers flicks? Nah, he's too geeky to be a killer. I think at least. Later on in the flick, Lori is in a classroom where the teacher is discussing some book. She looks out the window to see Michael standing there watching her. So, no one notices this creep just standing still all the time driving the exact same car? Jesus, pay attention, people! Anyway, the reason I'm bringing up the book is because of the thematic resonance it has to the movie itself. The answer that Lori gives to the teacher after she asks her to answer is all about fate, thus tying the concept of fate to Michael's evil, like it was his destiny to come back to Haddonfield all these years later. The themes of the film are some of the best themes I've ever seen in a horror flick. Mind you, I'm just talking about the first movie here. I'll get to the other flicks when I get to them. Okay, as any credible Halloween fan knows, there is a TV cut, sometimes known as the extended cut. When Halloween was sold to NBC in 1981, the same year Halloween 2 was released, John Carpenter had to make the film longer than its 90-minute runtime to feel like the required 2-hour time slot for television, so cuts had to be made to make it TV friendly. Basically, everything that makes the film a horror film was cut. While production was open on Halloween 2, Carpenter shot 12 extra minutes of footage for the film. Now, you might think that this extra footage would include something that would make the film clearer, but no, the scenes are just extra stuff that adds no bearing to the plot. In the first scene, Loomis is trying to get Smith's Grove to transfer Michael to a higher security new institution with some scenes in the middle with Loomis and Mike. In another, Loomis and some nurses walk into Michael's room to find it busted up with a window broken. The word sister is scratched into his door, which seems to be Carpenter retroactively putting in foreshadowing for Halloween 2's twist, which he came up with in a drunken fit of writer's block writing that movie. In the final scene, Linda runs into Lori's house convinced someone is following her, and Lori is wearing a tower on her head because Jamie Lee Curtis's hair was short when this was filmed. You're not missing out much by not watching this cut, but the separate scenes are available on the latest Blu-ray releases if you're eager to watch them. Let's talk more about Loomis, the thematic centerpiece of the film. Donald Pleasance portrays Loomis as hanging on by one last thread, exposed to an unknown evil for a long 15 years. Loomis is obviously on the edge, constantly in pursuit of his patient. He seems to be on the brink of insanity. Loomis really plays two roles in the film. One is a heroic archetype typical of movies back then, but the other, and the more interesting in my opinion, is his function as a service to Michael as an antagonist. Part of me wants to believe that it was probably Loomis's ramblings and speeches about Michael's evil that prevented the killer from dying all these years later, that it was Loomis all along who kept Michael's legacy alive. Okay, small tangent, a lot of the characters in this film are named after fictional characters and even real-life people, most notably Loomis, who is named after a character from Psycho. And to most people's knowledge, Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. A lot of Psycho connections in this movie. One thing I found weird though is that most people either humor Loomis's attempts to warn them of Michael or just full on don't believe him. Why is that? I mean, sure, Loomis is kinda crazy in the head, rambling on about evil and a little boy, but he was Michael's doctor for 15 years. I think his opinion has some credibility. Anyway, the main person who Loomis spends a lot of time in the movie with is Sheriff Brackett, played by Charles Cypress, who is also Annie's dad. Haddonfield really is small.
Aren't you gonna be late?
Huh?
I said, aren't you gonna be late?
He shouts, too.
Brackett acts as a foil character to Loomis, having a calm and collected nature, juxtaposing Loomis's hysteria over his escaped patient. The sheriff does try his best to humor the doc's panic, but he doesn't really believe him. Ha! How ironic. While checking out the Myers house, Loomis and Brackett find a dead dog. Hey, of course Michael eats raw dog. It's my favorite meal. But, of course, the thing this scene is most known for is the monologue that Loomis says to Brackett. This part is honestly my second favorite part of the film, right behind the climax. The speech just perfectly encapsulates the type of evil Michael is, a being, a personification of pure evil, a walking folktale that soon becomes legend. He's a looming fear that sits in the back of everyone's minds. Loomis is really the only person who has been exposed to Mike's evil, so he's arguably the one best equipped to deal with him. Donald Pleasence was hesitant to accept the role of Loomis, but he eventually relented because his daughter liked the music in John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. Just the music itself, of course, not the movie. God, I wonder how John felt about that. Initially, Carpenter wanted either Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee, veteran Hammer horror actors, who would have both been great in the role, but it's hard imagining anyone else other than Pleasence in the role. He hams it up playing an eccentric, crazed doctor on the hot trail of evil. Enough with all of that, though. Let's get to what you all have been waiting for. Michael Myers himself. The Shape, the Boogeyman, the one killer to rule them all. Honestly, Michael doesn't really get a lot of screen time in this flick, so not a lot of time is spent getting to know him. But that's my favorite thing about the movie. Michael's actually better when he's unknown, which is something I have a gripe with in the sequels. The movie gives us subtle hints at Michael's presence, seemingly random at first, but the hints eventually converge and give us clues about Michael's character. The movie clearly shows us that Laurie and her friends are targets. The movie then gives us those subtle hints, or maybe not so subtle ones thrown in there too. This leaves the audience in suspense on when Michael might strike next. John Carpenter's iconic, simplistic score really serves Michael as a villain. The score seems to follow the characters around wherever they go, like Michael, giving him an omnipotent feel, like he's always watching the characters, always around them. The cinematography also serves Michael, contrasting the bright day scenes containing a small, peaceful suburbia with the dark, foreboding night scenes brought to life by Dean Cundey. Shadows dominate the world at night, giving off a scary unknown that creeps up your spine over time. Loomis shines in the night world with his long coat, scaring some kids by pretending to be a black man or something.
Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there.
Is Loomis using AAVE? Getting back to Michael creeps on Annie standing through a window while she's busy getting undressed after spilling hot butter on her clothes. She's on the phone with her boyfriend, I've literally forgotten his name, and Michael hears all the worst parts. Jeez, it's like he's a mother with selective hearing. The cool thing about this scene is that Michael doesn't just jump out at Annie and stabs her quickly. He waits until she hops into her fogged up car and pops up at her and strangles her. Nancy Keys really hams it up playing her death scene, her death face looking questionable. Michael then swiftly delivers the killing cut, slitting her throat. The scene is silent too, except for one loud jump scare sound effect. This is literally the second named character death, and we're 50 minutes into the movie. I guess there is a darkly sexual undertone to the movie. The three teenagers who were killed by Michael in 78 were all either having sex or on their way to have sex, and the one girl who survives didn't do any of those things. If you really dig deep, I guess you could say that Laurie survives because she didn't have sex, and the movie conflates exploring sexuality before marriage with death. Laurie is a responsible teenager, looking after Tommy and eventually little Lizzie Wallace when Annie abandons the young girl. Wow, she really seems to like The Thing from Another World, which John Carpenter will end up remaking 4 years later. That's cool to think back on. The message here is clear. Have your priorities straight, or an escaped mental patient will kill you without remorse. Nifty. On their way to hang out with Annie, Linda and her totally nerdy boyfriend, Bob, basically break into the Wallace's house and have sex on the bed. They don't even know whose bed it is. The Wallaces must have had to do a lot of seam cleaning.
Then you rip my clothes off, then we rip Lindsay's clothes off.
Is he a pedophile? What the hell? Post-coitus, Bob goes downstairs to get a beer.
Go get me a beer.
I thought you were gonna get me one.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
He just broke a rule. Code red, code red! But he ends up impaled onto the pantry. This marks the beginning of Michael's otherworldly strength, holding up a probably 200-pound man and having the knife hold him up after. Michael is so gimmicky. Michael himself was mainly played by Nick Castle, a slender, somewhat lanky man, but he would go on to become a respected filmmaker himself. He gives Michael a way of moving that the other movies had to measure up against. Michael looks like he doesn't belong in the world he inhabits. He doesn't move his arms when he walks. He never runs, but walks at a swift pace, and his shoulders are stiff and risen, not resting. He isn't like the standard killer at the time. He doesn't make his bloodlust known bombastically. We really don't even know if he has any bloodlust. He just kills people for the sake of it. The only sign that Michael is human at all is the breathing sound effects, like he can barely breathe underneath the mask. On the topic of the mask, Michael was originally going to have a clown mask, mirroring the costume Michael had as a kid in 1963, but they eventually decided upon a Captain Kirk mask painted white, and the look is the definition of iconic. I think the mistake a lot of people make going into this film is expecting it to be full of blood and gore. This isn't that kind of movie. Watch the sequels if you enjoy that stuff, but the main goal of the first film is to evoke a sense of suspense and terror in the audience, which makes it distinct from its eventual imitators. The last kill of the film is its most iconic. Michael walks into the room dressed in a sheet with Bob's glasses, which is enough to convince Linda that that's her boyfriend, I guess, to the point of showing her breasts. It's revealed to be Michael, surprise surprise, who ends Linda's life strangling her while she's on the phone with Lori, all while she's sounding very suggestive. Of course, after putting the kids to bed, Lori heads over to the Wallaces to check up on her friends. She's just wandering through a dark, empty house all alone on Halloween night. Does she not expect that something is amiss? She eventually heads upstairs to find Annie sprawled upon the bed beneath Judah's gravestone, and she looks like she's crucified on a cross. Didn't expect to see Christian imagery in a horror film, but okay. Michael is a real showman, of course, because she finds the bodies of Linda and Bob put up like a Halloween Horror Nights attraction. If you can't go to Halloween Horror Nights, just do it yourself at home. Michael soon emerges from the shadows, becoming one himself, and stabs Lori's shirt. Man, he is horrible at aiming his knife. Lori falls down the stairs and ends up limping. Geez, Mike is really abusive. Good thing I never had an SO. There's not much of a cat and mouse chase in this flick, but what is there is good. The thing that makes the scene so masterful is that no one believes Lori is yelling at the top of her lungs for someone to help her. That just goes to show that even when you're being chased by a maniacal killer, neighbors will still be spiteful towards you. Petty pieces. At the end, Loomis finally notices that he hasn't been in the movie for like 10 minutes and enters the scene, breaking into the Wallace's house as well. These people sure do just walk into people's houses a lot, Jesus. The final standoff between Loomis and Michael is great. Loomis finally getting what he wanted, a chance to finally be able to kill his patient. He runs upstairs to see Michael strangling Lori, and she pulls up his mask to reveal not a monster face. Yeah, Michael is really just a human, but his face does look kind of distorted a bit. No offense to Tony Moran, who played him in the scene. Loomis pulls out a revolver and shoots some lead into the shape's body 6 times. Loomis is a total savage, but of course that doesn't work, and Michael waltzes into the Halloween night, or at least until he's caught and put into custody for 40 years. This ending is a masterpiece, one of the best endings in horror history. Michael's heavy breathing over John Carpenter's theme, composed of the film, really sends us off with an unsettling pit in our stomach. Our minds get clouded with the never-ending presence of the shape, and the shots of all the places he could be. So that was Halloween, my favorite horror film ever, a true classic of the horror genre, and a landmark film in cinema history. I hope I did a well enough job in completing the gigantic task of urging you to watch this movie. Let's be honest, you've probably seen this flick before, and I'll send you off on your merry way with my rating. I'll give this film my highest score yet of Gone Away From Home. I really just want to see how Michael got his jumpsuit from the mechanic. Is there any deleted scenes out there? If you like this video, like it. But if you loved it, make sure you subscribe to me, Captain Myenstein. Make sure you follow me on my social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Captain Myenstein, and Reflect Vids on Twitter. Make sure you hit that subscribe icon and hit that bell notification so you get notified when I upload new videos. I hope your nightmares are plentiful, and I hope to see you again for another episode of The Captain Myenstein Show.